takes on these.
Yeah, so I know you've also been up, you know, weren't you up to like 4 o'clock in the morning? Wasn't that what you texted me?
No, I
Me,
got up.
No, Austin.
me and Austin are like Batman. By the way, me and Austin will like snap each other at like 3:30, and it's
This is
like
true.
like me and
Dude, I
Austin are
can't do that,
definitely
dude.
Batman.
You text me after like midnight, you might get a response. And honestly, since I sold my couch, like I go to bed at like 10 o'clock. Like I'm
Man,
old as fuck.
I would love to be able to do that. I have like horrible insomnia, so like it's a pain for me to fall asleep, and then like on days like this where I have to go in the office, it's like a 75-minute commute, so you got to get up at like
Yeah.
5:30 or
No, I
5,
feel
and
that.
so it's just like all right, well,
Well,
so
you want to what's a cure for insomnia?
alcoholism.
Well, I was gonna say, well, probably not alcohol, because that fucks with your REM sleep. But well, marijuana does too. But marijuana will put you to sleep. We
Andrew's
got like
just
some
go-
CBD or something.
Andrew's just going through his list. You guys didn't like my idea.
Xanax makes you go to sleep.
This man's really going through his list. I said we need to start like a drinking game, or like if I stutter, or if like Andrew talks about weed or something, we just do a shot and just
Yeah.
see how like hammered we can get off one podcast.
Well, I'll still be up at 4 a.m. to be living with that drunk.
Yeah, that'd be like literally Andrew. He'll literally message me out of the blue at like 2:57 a.m. and then I'm like somehow still awake. And like we'll have like a actual conversation, and then like just like okay, well I'll talk to him again like tomorrow at like 1 a.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
The city needs me, dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm back and forth there.
Dude, I honestly didn't even know you guys were like snapping each other. That's actually kind of cool.
I mean, yeah, what else are we supposed to do with our lives? We're like
I'm
late
I'm like
20s.
I'm also about to work on moving Austin into I'm about to try to persuade him to move to the AFP North Carolina chapter.
Oh, well, if Mr. Musk has his way, you might have to take you up on it.
Oh man, I mean, I know the golden night was to talk about the German elections, but I could give you a whole story on that this weekend. What all happened with that?
Well, you want to start off with that, and then we can just switch over and do Germany for 15 minutes after that.
Yeah, we can. I mean, it was. I mean, honestly, we can probably get this done in like 2 seconds.
Oh, okay, go for it.
I mean, probably the funniest thing to me was like, and I guess I gotta kind of be careful what I say, but the funniest thing to me was like, so they sent that on like Saturday. We're getting emails from like the HR departments at like our like local HR, and they're like, "Yeah, we have no guidance at this time. We have no idea what to tell you." And then I get in today, and I get three different emails. Like one's like, wait for guidance." The next one's like, "Okay, we're not getting any guidance." And then the third one's like, "I mean, I guess if you want to do it, you can do it if you want." And then after I got home, I got like a thing. It was like, "Yeah, OPM now says you don't have to do it. It's completely optional." So I'm just like, I honestly have no idea what was going on today. Like
No,
this whole thing.
dude, I was listening to somebody talk about it, and they were like, yeah, like they got a message, and they were like asking their congressman, like, what should I do about this? And he's like, honestly, I don't know. And he's like, just respond to it, and but there's so many conflicting answers, and I'm like, how the
Oh yeah,
fuck is this like normal, like nobody knows like what to do or what not to do.
that was exactly what happened today. And like, what was funny about it is, like I said, like they sent that like, I think I got the email like, I think the timestamp was literally it was some random time. It was like 7:19 p.m. on Saturday. So I'm like, okay, that's weird. And then I got emails from local HR yesterday, and then I got three from them today, and then I got two from my like directs, yeah, like building manager and stuff. So it was just like I hadn't like they couldn't tell us anything. I mean, it was just like nobody knew what was going on. It was just I working for the government, you see a lot of clusters, but that was that was definitely probably one of the biggest clusters I've seen so far. Like nobody knew what they were doing.
So, do you think government normally works well, or like handles these kind of things? Like, do you think Biden's administration did a better job?
I mean, they didn't try like. Now, granted, I've only now worked under two administrations, so I can't really say if this like from a long term perspective. It was definitely like I think they were just like they had no intentions of trying to like conduct like major reforms or anything. So it's just kind of like they didn't want to do anything like this. I think
Yeah.
so. I think this is more kind of like we're wanting to transform it. So obviously you got to ruffle some feathers to do that. I mean, like, I'm not even personally opposed to, like, within reason. Like, I get it. There is certain stuff. I mean, like, truthfully, like, truth be told, they're like, I'm trying to think of the most egregious example
So
I can
hold on.
think
So
of.
here's a question. Why are you thinking of that?
Think about what?
What you were gonna say.
Oh, okay.
If the government, like, legitimately, they're like, hey, we can do this job with fewer people, and they designated your job as one of the jobs to get cut, how would you feel about that?
I mean, obviously, I'd be devastated. I mean, you know, I'm married now and all that, so I mean, it's kind of like it would be a
But would you be like,
major.
wow, it's probably like if it made, like, say the VA or whatever, whatever group you're in saves 10%, and like, would you
If
be
we're,
like,
I mean,
oh
if
well, like that's like, I kind
I
of
would
got
get
caught
it.
up in it, like, so you're saying you would get it?
Yeah, like I'm not like I'm for one. For me, I come from like a family of veterans, so like specifically from what I do. I mean, if it makes their lives better, then like okay, whatever. I can find another job. I'm young, but like, and then too, there is. I mean, like there is also a lot of stuff I can think of. Like if they send out an email like asking for suggestions, like one thing I could say right now is like the system I run to do my job. I think it's from like 1993, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So like it's older than I am. So I mean, it's like I mean, there's a lot of stuff they could do to increase efficiency and this
But
or
if they
that.
did that
I mean,
and you lost your job, you kind of get it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, within reason. I mean, if it's something stupid like, like okay, like again, I gotta be careful what I say for obvious reasons. But like, okay, like the email, like okay, if you know, originally it was like, oh, if you don't respond to the email, it's going to be taken as resignation. I think that's stupid because there was like one of the things they brought that was brought up to us today was like, or people brought up was like, okay, there's people on leave today. That deadline is tonight at 11:59. So like, what are they supposed to do? They're not even like, you know, they're off today and they're not even legally allowed to work off the clock. So it's like, so if it was something stupid like that, yeah, that would bother me. But I mean, if it's like, okay, we've increased efficiency enough to where yada yada yada, okay, I could see it. And I mean,
So my congressman, Rich McCormick, Josh and I talked about this. Maybe it was like last week or something. Um, and I was like, yeah, like he was all over the news because people were pissed off. And some of the stuff he said is like, oh, like some of these jobs are going to be, I think, like duplicitous uh, with AI. And so if they came in and started doing a bunch of AI to kind of like automate out your job, how would you then feel about that?
now I have to be careful what I say for personal benefit reasons. I mean, honestly, there is a lot of stuff that I have seen, and I'm not going to get in specifics again for obvious reasons, but I could definitely see that happening in the next 10 years. Like, there's a lot of different occupations that I have viewed in the, like, in my
But
time with her.
so this is I was thinking about this earlier, and I was because that kind of stuck with me. And I was sitting here and I was like, okay, let's say that was Austin's job. I'd be like, well, yeah, like that would suck for Austin. But I'm like, but didn't you go to school or you went to like a vocational program so that you could do this job?
Yeah, what I'm specifically doing now, I did, I can't remember if it's considered an associate's or if it's considered like a career thing. I think it was considered a career thing, but don't hold me to that. So, like originally, like not to get too deep in my own, you know, life or whatever, but like originally I was going to be like a teacher, and then
Hmm.
COVID happened, and then that kind of fell apart, and yada yada yada. So I mean, yeah, I mean, but it's like I said, like if it makes sense, I get it, and I mean realistically, even if I wasn't okay with it, I mean at the end of the day, what am I going to do? I mean that's how the world works. I mean,
But would you feel even worse because like you went to a program to do this job and now it's obsoleted?
I have thought about that, like I really have, because like I am, I mean like I can see that happening in my
Yeah.
field. I really can. So I mean, like there is. I mean, I didn't really have to pay anything for it, so it's not like I'm not like one of these people that uh the one I saw recently was like where AI programs are getting so good they can replace a lot of translators with people now, or
Yeah.
not people programs. So it's like at least I'm not one of these people that paid like $60,000 to become whatever, and then
Yeah.
So I mean,
No, I mean,
this,
I mean that, and that's why I'm kind of asking because I'm like, I mean, like I said, I was just sitting there, and I was like, it's like, fuck, like, is Austin just back in the shitter? You know, and like,
yeah,
I was
I
sitting
mean,
there
more or
thinking
less,
about
yeah,
that, and I, like I said, I was sitting here, and I was like, it's like, holy shit, like, I was looking at this entire AI thing, and I was like, we're gonna be like putting money into it, and it's gonna create high paying jobs and everything like that, right? You know, you're gonna have more engineers that are gonna be needed, some of these good things. And I was sitting here and I was like, it's like, okay, so you see the positives, and I knew they were there, but I didn't completely think about the negatives. And I was like, well, the negatives are is like people like you who like, you know, or maybe not you, people worse off than you who paid all that money to go do what you're doing, and
Mhm.
then they just kind of become obsolete. And I was like, fuck, like feel like think about those people. You know, like
Yeah,
that's gonna be tough. And like that's like okay, like how are you going? Like I think about it now, and I'm like, okay, how am I gonna fix that problem? And I don't think I've gotten very far with it yet. But I'm just sitting here like okay, like what? That's when you get the re-education stuff, and it's like okay, but then are you just kind of putting them back in the same area they were, but in a different field? Like how does all that kind of work? And you were kind of making me think of that.
yeah. I mean, for me personally, like one of the things I've thought about is like, okay, like I mean, like I'm about to be in a position where I can start, yeah, I can transfer out of this field because where I'm in now is more or less kind of like almost like I don't want to say starter position, but it's kind of like it's not super, it's I can transfer
Yeah,
out of
that's,
it and
that's where
get into
everybody
some,
comes in.
yeah. So I mean, it's like I can transfer out of it, and it's like, so I'm already kind of thinking about like that. So I'm like, okay, like get into something else because I mean, like there's certain stuff that you really can't automate away, like especially like I technically I'm trying to think how I can put it. So basically, I work in like it's not in a VA hospital, but it like manages VA hospitals. So it's like if I wanted to go back to the hospital, I mean, where that's more face to face, that's more, that sort of stuff. They really can't automate that away. But then I've also too, I'm looking at like, okay, like what's something else I could do or something just in case.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like for me personally, like I have kind of started networking just in case. Like okay, what are my options? What's my fallback if this happens or whatever.
Yeah.
So I
I
mean,
mean, but it's interesting because like the way that I look at it is I don't think about like I don't think about like okay, I'm coming in as an engineer, but I really want to be um our regulatory person or our clinical advisory person. Like I could get there, but nobody really comes in to I guess like an engineering position and thinks they're going to go somewhere else or like go into marketing or whatever, right? Like that doesn't
yeah,
happen as much. Um, it's more about like
and
okay, you
then
got the
too,
degree and that's what's important.
well too, and like it kind of also depends how they go about it because it's like if they like super automate a lot of what I currently do, and then there's still going to be people there within reason, and that could, I mean, like
Oh yeah, you're just shrinking
I'm
it. You're
trying
not
to think
getting
of
rid of
like
it.
yeah, and then too, the other thing I think about too is like I don't want to understate AI, but I'm also like I feel like people could take it too far in a sense because it's like the one example I always think about is like when they brought ATMs back in the 80s. Everybody thought, oh, that there goes banks. We'll have no reason for like bank tellers and stuff. And what it ended up happening was they like banks got to where they had fewer tellers per bank, but where it lowered the overhead cost so much they could have more banks. So the end result was you still had about the same amount of tailors. It was just like spread over more banks. I kind of think about that within terms of my positions because it's like we are constantly inundated in like work. Like it is like they've got like I can't remember how big their backlog is right now. So it's like yeah, AI could do that, but it's also like like there is certain positions like okay, like you actually have to contact insurance companies and kind of haggle with them, or you got to contact patients or do this or that. So it's like I still think there will be some stuff, and who knows, it could like lower the cost so much that could have more people for that other stuff to kind of increase that efficiency. So I don't it's one of those things, but like yeah, it is what you originally asked. Like it is kind of a concern,
Yeah.
but
What do you think would be a good solution out of that? Do you think if someone came in and said, "Hey, like we're going to do it, well, you can go back and do a training program or whatever." Do you think that would be something like to you that would be enticing?
yeah, I mean, and too
Like,
like
like, like, what would you like? If you had to rank them like that, or like, okay, you get to go to just college for free. If you want to go back to college, you can go to college. or you just want like a lump sum or a job retraining program, or like what do you think is like a good solution to that?
Now, are you talking specifically for like what I do, or you mean like in
Yeah,
general?
like you're doing what you're doing, you lost your job because of AI and you went in this training program. Now what are you going to do? Do you and
I mean,
what what should be there to help that out?
honestly, like the VA really needs people, like in general, like for a lot of different stuff. So like even if they automated my thing, if they had like a maybe like a retraining or maybe like a mixture of retraining and classes and stuff, like they always hardcore need like medical personnel, like direct medical personnel. So it's like that would be a
Mhm.
good thing. Like if you all of a sudden have all these admin slots like free, why not? If you're saving all this money on that now, why not just go ahead and like retrain people like me for something else? I mean, that would be the smart thing, but I don't,
So you're saying
if
you
that
would
all.
do like you do a clinical position.
Yeah, I mean, if they offered me training and stuff for it, yeah, or even if
Like
it's
they
like
were like,
another
"Hey,
admin
hey,
spot.
we'll teach you how to be like a nurse's assistant."
Yeah, I mean, within reason, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't
Because
hear too many people that are like, "Yeah, I do the accounts to okay, I'm going to stick someone with a needle." You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
interesting
I
that you
mean,
want to.
and there's also like different admin positions. Like I said, like there's stuff in the hospital. Like I know for a fact I'll never be able to automate just because like it's got public facing aspects of it that you really can't have a machine do, and it's also just like specifically, especially for like the VA, like where it's so like there is like a very big emphasis on the mission, like the veterans outreach and stuff like that. So it's like that's the sort of stuff that like, yeah, it may be a traditional admin spot, but like where you're directly in the hospital, it just wouldn't make sense to like automate stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But so I mean, maybe something like that or whatever. But
Um.
uh,
Yeah. That's it.
you want to go ahead and do the German
Yeah, I was gonna
elections?
say go. So, I know. So we'll talk about the German election. So I the only so I knew the guy because this is the first prime minister after Merkel, right?
I think, yeah.
So I always thought he was gonna have a tough fucking job, like real fucking tough. And then the whole Ukraine war thing happens. He was kind of there, and that's when I was like, okay, I think something's probably gonna happen um in Germany. And then Nord Stream 2 happened. So you had like a lot of these things kind of happening. I'm like, okay, something's gonna happen here in Germany. I don't know what it is. I know they've had this whole immigration stuff coming in too. And so I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things that are gonna be happening here. Or that are happening, and it's gonna end up being something pretty big. And I don't really know kind of like, I couldn't say, okay, how big is big? But now that we're kind of getting to the point where Elon Musk is like going and like talking about the AFD and everything like that, more people I think have started kind of getting their eyes on it. And I think that where we are now, it seems like the AFD's kind of they're not going to win it, right? They're not going to win it outright, but they're going to be a major stakeholder, one of the top three parties in government. Isn't that kind of like what's going on right now?
So
Because
they were
CDU's also doing good, and then is what SFD, right? Those are the big three.
traditionally in German politics, it's been the CDU, and it's got like a smaller. It's kind of like it's more like a Bavarian, which is kind of like a region of Germany party, but it's considered part of the
The
CDU.
Bavarians.
It's
Yeah.
called the CSU. So, but everybody just calls it the CDU. So whatever. And then the SDP, which is the Social Democratic Party. So those have traditionally been the big two in post-war Germany. And last night, for literally the first time in the SDP's history, it came in third. So AFD actually displaced them as the second largest party, which in of itself is pretty incredible. But like specific to like how that's going to like shake out coalitions and stuff. Um, Last night they came within. I think the last tally I saw, like there was this smaller, like kind of like left wing party called BSW, and it's sort of old school left in the sense it's kind of
It
I don't know
was
if
DSW.
yes, I don't you really can't. I'm not really sure if communist is the right label for it because it's like it's kind of pro Russia. It's kind of socially conservative, but it's also like really like left wing economically. So it's kind of almost like a throwback to like old like East Bloc parties in a way. But so in the German parliament, it's called the Bundestag. They've got like a 5% threshold. So BSW came within like 13,000 votes of being above that threshold. So if that had happened, it would have basically put all the parties in a situation where it would have been almost impossible for CDU to form a coalition without AFD, because they would have had to bring in the SDP, they would have had to bring in the FDP, which is kind of like this minor liberal party, and then they would have had to bring in the Greens because this is this other thing. And then at that point, you're reaching a point where it's like you've got this center-right conservative party, you've got the center-left, and the CDP, the SDP, and then you've got the Greens, which are like a left-wing party. And at that point, it's such an unwieldy coalition, it just wouldn't, work out. And like I said, they came within 13,000 votes of that being happening. So there was a very high likelihood, most people realized, that if that happened, either, like I said, you'd have an unwieldy coalition, you'd have to have another elections within a few months, or, CDU would have had to hold its nose and strike a deal with AFD. So, I mean, it's very much a possibility in the next few years. And, like, based off, like, the gains AFD is making and where their support is, like, it is a very real possibility within this decade you'll see them in a coalition. Now,
One thing I think is interesting is on that chart you showed, like you said, it looked like the CDU is all kind of Bavaria, so it's kind of all that South Germany, and then a little bit of the West Germany, and then you've got SPD, and all them kind of being in the north, and then the AFD kind of being in the southeast. And what I thought was interesting was it was that all of those places that were kind of voting SPD, that like center left left wing party, went to the CDU. So like I thought it was interesting, yeah, like the SPD went down and AFD went up, but I also thought it was interesting the CDU went up as well. And so it's almost kind of it's like, yeah, like it almost kind of makes me think, okay, there were some people who, if they were kind of on the right or kind of more conservative or whatever, they were pushed over to the AFD, where some of the more middle of the road people kind of were pushed over into the CDU. That's
yeah,
kind of how I looked at it. So
and
it's
that
like, yeah, there's a shift, but if it recalibrates back, you're probably going to see the AFD maybe go back down. That's just one interpretation that I had.
I'd have to pull the data, but from what I had saw, which is kind of like something a lot of people brought up, when you look at how everybody voted, it was mostly like the German boomers were mostly voting
Yep. Yeah, I
CDU,
know what you're saying.
and,
All
and
the
then
younger
like
people were like AFD, right?
well then too there was also like a lot of them voted for I'm gonna want to butcher the pronunciation, but it's called Der Link, which is like the left in German, so it's like this super left wing party over there.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like it's somebody like I hesitate to make this comparison because obviously people are going to take it a certain way, but like it very much is a historical overlap. Like if you know anything about the Weimar era in Germany, like it really is a lot of the same kind of data points. We're kind of picking, like I was picking them up last night, and this like you made the point like okay, like CDU did really good in like South Germany and like Northwest Germany and stuff like that. Those areas, see, the South is overwhelmingly Catholic, or at least historically
Yep.
it was Catholic, and then the Northwest had a kind of more of a mix, but it was like especially like the Rhineland and like the Ruhr and stuff. It's mostly Catholic, and like if you go back to Weimar elections, there was a party called the Center Party, and it was almost the same kind of middle of the road, conservative but not super conservative, mostly based on Catholic support. So that was the areas they used to win in, and then you saw like in East Germany, it was mainly like the far left and the far right winning, and
Yeah.
so that was something that caught my eye. And then too, like
Well, so like I looked up that chart you were saying by age, and I'm like honestly like yeah like the 18 and 24-year-olds probably. I mean, I guess you could maybe say like I would say from 35 years old and up, the CDU's probably been pretty consistent. But then it's at 25, it's at 18 to like 20, the 18 to 34 where it kind of goes down a little bit.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like what you're saying. I mean, so that's why I can see that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and two, like, one thing that really kind of hurts these parliamentary systems. So, like, here in America, we've got a two-party system, which kind of sucks in certain ways, but it's also like, where there's so big tent, you can have these generational turnovers, and the parties can kind of,
Yeah.
they can flip issues, they can move kind of. We're so big tent. I mean, you basically just have to move. I mean, that's just how it works out. We're in Germany, like, where it's a parliamentary system, like these parties, they can just die and be replaced. Like FDP was not, FDP. I think they were under the threshold this time, if I'm not mistaken. So they, that party could die. I mean, and then too, I don't want to pretend like I'm super, informed of modern German politics, but I do know there is a lot of kind of like hate towards FDP now. So maybe that party's going to disappear after this election. I mean, this is the first time they've not. I think this is the first time they've not hit the threshold in a while.
Yeah.
So I mean,
So are these results final or what?
yeah. So they finished counting yesterday.
Oh, okay.
So, and I
For some
mean,
reason I thought I heard people being like, "Oh, it's pending." Like this is kind of like what it's going to look like. Like, oh, like it's almost kind of like it's all like exit polls, where it's like, "Hey, here's
Yeah.
kind of where we're looking at, and here's what we think we're going to get, and all that kind of stuff."
yeah. So like a lot of times in Europe, from what I understand, so they'll release those exit polls, and then usually like they'll finalize it after the counting's finished. But usually, for some reason, their exit polls tend to be a lot more accurate than ours. I mean, there's I don't know, couldn't really tell you why, but it's kind of an interesting cultural difference. But it's just, I don't know, it's very interesting. And like the thing that like you immediately picked up on, which I've known this for a while, and I found it very interesting. When you look at the map, you see the former East Germany, like East Germany,
East West, 100%.
yeah, and then and it's just so, and you could see that in a lot of different things. It's not just political results. Like I mean, and it was I've had this take for a while. It's almost like Prussia's coming back. And then like I was looking at comments and some of the stuff I sent you today, and like the number one comment under one of those posts was like, "I see Prussia," and it's like, yeah, I mean. It is kind of interesting to see these historical borders are still kind of with us, and I mean, too, I mean, like that region is just so different from the rest of Germany, even now. I mean, you can kind of almost, I don't want to necessarily like say it's for sure, but I mean, like you can kind of, it's not impossible to think like, okay, maybe one day, East Germany will be its own thing again, just because like it's so different. So I mean, it's kind of interesting to notice these, it's just so obvious in the maps. It's like, okay, like maybe, in the future there may not be united Germany again. I mean, history. So it's kind of interesting in that regard too, I thought.
Yeah, I'm looking at I'm looking at a map. I'm trying to see if I can fucking find it. But it was just kind of making me think, and I was like, well, like it seems like also a lot of the people, god damn it. Let me see. There you go. It looked like when I was looking at the map, East Germany didn't really have much, right? Like cities, I was like, okay, like what cities were in there that were like major population centers? And I was like, okay, you got Dresden, and then Berlin and Frankfurt, and not in Potsdam and some of those places. And I'm like in Leipzig. I was like, that's about all you got, And so I'm like, I'm almost wondering if this is like a rural urban divide there as well. Like what else is going on? Some of those just socioeconomic ties. I'm also wondering if that's there as well. Because you did mention the East and the West. I know a lot of what's it? I think it's like the life expectancies are like much lower on the East than the West. Just all that kind of stuff. So I'm almost wondering if what else is there.
Well, I mean, somebody made a comparison, and I don't know how accurate it is, but based off of what I've seen, it kind of made sense. I mean, take it for what it is. But they kind of compared it almost to the way, like, East Germany is historically lagged behind since reunification. A lot of the youth left after the wall came down and stuff. And it's, I mean, like I said, you look at different maps, you can see it. It's a poor region by most metrics you can think of. It's the way somebody compared it to is almost like West Virginia or Kentucky or something like that. It's like one of these
Yeah.
states that here they've kind of been left behind, and you do kind of see it in the election data. Like AFD did, like it actually won the votes of like working class Germans. They got, I
Yeah.
think it was 37% in total, and like I
Well,
think
that's
that
what I'm saying. I almost wonder what else is there, right?
it's
Because I'm
it's
looking at this and I'm like, okay, there's the, like you said, there's the East and the West. So there's some other stuff going on there that I think would be
Yeah.
interesting. And like, I don't know much about German history, or I mean, I know not a decent bit about their history, but I don't know much about their specific political situation. I know they're pissed that they don't have nuclear energy anymore, but
yeah.
that's about the only thing I know.
Well, one other kind of thing I'll note with that is like it people were pointing out like they actually did get in a lot of like southern Germany and like northwestern Germany. So there is the CDU one. They did get about 10-20%. So I mean that is kind of like a sign that they are starting to like broaden their appeal. I mean that's obviously a small amount, but like they made the point like back in 2021 that's about what they were doing in East Germany. So I mean it's not. And then two, they did make some inroads in Bavaria, which I think is like the richest region in Germany. So, if I'm wrong on that, somebody
Which
correct
one?
me. I think Bavaria is like the richest region, and they did make
Bavaria.
Bavaria, and I think they make some pretty good gains there too. So I mean, at least as
So
far as
this, let me.
percentages.
Oh shit! I can't turn my. Hey Josh, turn the sharing on. Um. So Bavaria is like the south part.
You
I
said
think it's
turn the
like
what on?
the sharing on.
You have to request to do something so I can do that.
Let me see.
We're very technically skilled here at the podcast.
Well, I know that's why I'm like, where's my young Jamie? See, it says the host isn't allowing multiple presenters.
Young Jamie.
Yeah. Young Jamie Vernon. Whatever. Anyway, the I don't know.
Andrew, try that.
Okay, let me see. There you go. Okay. So this is one of the ones I found. So
Let's
this is
see.
Biner or
Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah, it's
Good
Bavaria. Yeah.
lord.
Yeah.
What is this?
This was just a map of like just major cities in Germany. And just so we've got an idea of like what we're talking about, because we were talking about like kind of the east and the west. I mean, that's like right here,
Yeah, that's old East Germany right there.
But it's interesting though, because like when you do look at it historically, like you had you had Prussia that's kind of like right along here,
Yeah,
right? And so like that's coming in, and you would think like, okay, like if that's where the center of your empire essentially came from, you'd think that they'd have a little bit more, be a little bit more economically developed over there.
well,
I know
yes,
I mean, this is the whole reason why they wanted to move this way because of all the German states.
Mhm.
But I'm just thinking, like, like you'd think you would want to do that.
So Prussia was like historically like a very agrarian area, and like so they used to own Silesia, but that's now owned by Poland. That used to be like their major industrial
Yeah,
area.
that's like right here, right?
Yeah, right about there. And then like the other areas they owned after Napoleon was defeated was out there like Rhineland and God, how do you pronounce it? Nordrhein Westfalen. Back then it was called
Good attempt. Good attempt.
yeah, what but so I mean like that was like the like core industrial areas of like Germany and stuff. Prussia was like more agrarian and then it was kind of like a late bloomer. But like
Yeah.
and then too, you got to figure in like 2 world wars and then Soviet occupation for like 50 years. So
Hey, listen, if you ever want to know if the free market won, there's a Baskin Robbins that sits right beside Stalin's original birthplace.
yeah, that's true.
If you ever want to know if the free market won, baby.
Well, somebody made a really funny point because we're like AFD won so like overwhelmingly in like East Germany. I saw somebody make a tweet today. It's like I know if North Korea ever reunites with like South Korea, that's gonna be like the most right wing place on the planet.
Oh, 100%.
It's like that's a pretty good point. What's funny about it though is like they're also like very pro Russian. So it's like they're right
The
wing.
Koreans or the Germans?
Like the East Germans, like
Yeah, that's one thing that I never understood is that Germany. I mean, they had Nord Stream too. I mean, like, and they were full bore on that shit. And I always just thought it was interesting that it seemed like the Germans. I always viewed it as them being pragmatic, being like, hey, like, we cannot get the resources we need just from Germany. we got to go where the resources are the most plentiful and where they're the cheapest. And it's like, okay, that's Russia. You know, like when you can't produce everything your own and you look for like what's the closest one, you know, you kind of start, you know, cozying up to Russia. So I get it. You know, I don't think there's
or
much more than that.
trying to conquer Russia, as they may have attempted once or twice.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but like today, like why are they?
Yeah.
Why does Germany have such a good relationship with Russia compared to others? Was they're a little bit more pragmatic about it. You know, they kind of realize the situation they're in.
And too,
Um,
like a lot of East Germans, like I mean, obviously, like the initial, like I don't think any of them would deny the initial occupation was horrible, but a lot of them seem like not all Germans, but like East Germans seem to have kind of like a, I guess, nostalgia for the GDR because
yeah.
it's kind of like it's called like it is a term. It's called like Ost. I think it's Ostalgie. I'm probably butchering that, but oh well.
No, I know
But
what you're
like,
talking about. Well, and it's the one too. It's like okay, you know, my economic gains went up 5%, but like everywhere else in Germany, it's like 50%.
yeah.
And it's like those people being like, yeah, like I feel like it was much better back then because it was more fair, you know.
So I mean, like as earlier I was talking about the comparison to like maybe like West Virginia or something like that.
Hmm.
Like the one confounding thing with that though is like East Germany is like super atheist. Like this kind of the legacy of the communists. Like their religion is almost dead there. So it is kind of that is the one. Like I said, like some people are kind of comparing it to like Germany's kind of version of Trumpism, but it's like you know the big basis of Trumpism here is he gets all the support of the evangelicals, but like there, that doesn't exist. So that kind of does make it's kind of an interesting note on that. I think so. I mean, it does kind of show
So
it's
you're saying if
similar,
they were
but
more
it's different.
Christian, he would be like a Christian nationalist instead of just a nationalist?
I don't know if I would say that because like this, the CDU is literally the Christian. Uh, how does it go? It's like I think it's the Christian Democratic
Christian,
Union.
yeah, it's the Christian Democratic Party. Yeah.
So I mean, like that was ostensibly what they were, but it's kind of like I don't know. Like I,
Well, I mean, with full transparency, like when I take those quizzes and like for Germany, and they're like, "What party would I most align with?" It'd be the CDU. Like, trust me, I'm not like throwing shame at any group. Um, but for me, it's kind of like, well, you know, like that's where I fall. Like I've got nothing against those
they're
people.
very like they've definitely moved past their roots because like I said, they're
Well, so I actually heard somebody say something that was super interesting. Is they were telling me that I think it was like I can't remember. They're like we have the Christian Democratic Party in Europe and things like that because America doesn't because America was founded on Christian identity, like roots and stuff like that. So they're like America is inherently Christian and therefore they don't need a Christian Democratic Party because it's just the party or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? So they don't make
it's
that distinction because it's already built into the system.
it's definitely kind of like what is the term for it? Like different political cultures, I guess, because there's
Yeah.
like, and then too, it's like the confounding thing with like European politics, like a lot of it goes back to it's like so many of these countries like collapsed were just like absolutely destroyed. I mean, over the course of two world wars, I mean, go figure, and then the
Oh,
Cold
100%. Dude, I mean, like
War.
Europe, I mean, it's bad.
So
Like they killed each other.
yeah, so it's going to be kind of wacky over there just because the legacy of that. Whereas here we've kind of you know we've had the Civil War, but since then it's been pretty stable. So it's kind of like it's like I guess less kind of wackiness is the way I would put it. But
Oh yeah, no, I've said that the second another nation bombs US soil, America's psyche is going to change 360. Like imagine if Mexico started just lobbing bombs over into El Paso or wherever. Like I think Americans would be like, "Whoa." Like they would wake the fuck up and then be like, "No, no, no, no." Like but at the same time I'm like, I don't even know if they would know what to do. Like I'm seriously, I feel like if we're shooting bombs over, in El Paso, like I don't think most people would be like, "Oh, I'm ready." Like I'm going to defend my country or my soil, my house, whatever it is. Like it'd be all panic, you know. And I
mhm.
think it's just because they're not accustomed to that stuff. Whereas like you're here in Germany and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've had Napoleon run through here. We've had World War I, World War II. Like we've had all this shit coming here." And they just got like a little. They're just built a little different.
Mhm. So I mean, it's. I think the biggest takeaway you can take from this is like, honest, like a lot of people are blaming it on COVID, or they're blaming it on like their Green New
Oh,
Deal. I think
bullshit.
a lot of it goes back to like the war in Ukraine. Like that is so fundamentally reshaped everything. It's like it's the I sent you guys the maps earlier of like the 2021 election, so before Ukraine, and then look at it now, and it's like it's just undeniable that like we are living through like I think 20 30 years from now, people are going to look back and like fully realize like, okay, that, the Ukraine war was really the event that like it set the tone for this epoch, and it's kind of setting the terms of like what the new paradigm is going to look like going forward. Because I
So
mean,
do you
like
think if the AFP or the AFD, is it the AFD?
AFD, yeah,
Okay. I
AFP
was
is
about
Josh.
I know. I was like, well,
We're
I was
going,
like,
we're going to make Josh the new
too
chancellor
many
of
fucking
Germany.
like acronyms or whatever here. But so the AFD, if they come in and they take over, and one of the policies that they pursue is uh remilitarizing, like obviously they got a military, but expanding the military and growing, when would you be concerned, if at all?
I don't think I would be, because like it's not clear they're going to support that. Like their main thing is like immigration. Like that is the one thing they keep hammering home. Now Mers, who is the CDU guy, he's made that clear. Like he wants to expand, like dramatically expand, I should say, like defense spending, and he's kind of filling out like the SDP, because like they're going to have to do a coalition with the SDP. But now the problem with that is like, but this is kind of crazy to think if you know anything about German politics. It's like, so even a coalition of the CDU and the SDP is not going to have enough numbers to overcome what's called the debt break. So the Germans have this policy. It's like they can only spend up to a certain amount.
Oh yeah,
That,
of the
that break,
GDP, right?
yeah. So like that
Like
debt break kicks
40%
in.
or something.
Yeah, something. It's so they've not the two parties together don't have enough to overcome that. So they've got to get buy-in from some of the smaller parties on it too. And that was one of the things. I don't know if I sent it to you earlier
So is that a
because
Europe thing or is that a Germany thing?
that was it's
I
for
thought that
sure
was
a
a
German thing.
European thing.
I think the Germans forced it on the rest of Europe back in like
Okay,
during the
I believe that.
2008 stuff like that, because the Germans used to be like really hardcore on like fiscal discipline and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, um, so they're wanting to do that, but the problem is, like I said, they've not got the votes for it. FDP didn't make it in, so they either got to get buy-in from the Greens, or they got to get either Der Link or the AFD to sign off on it. They have to have at least one of the three to get enough votes to get that. So it's like, yeah, I'm willing to bet they'll get the Greens to sign on to it, which probably means they'll have to bring them in the coalition. But if you're, it goes back to what I started off saying. It's like you got your center right CDU, you got your center left SDP, and then you got your left Greens. That's not going to be a very stable coalition in the long run. So, what that'll kind of probably come back to bite them. But it's like, so it's honestly like a mainstream now as far as the parties like wanting to do military, dramatically increase the military. But I'm not really. AFD doesn't really seem as interested in that as they do, and I think that kind of goes back to like AFD is kind of more pro-German, or not pro-German, but pro-Russian. So I kind of feel like they don't really see the need for it. Whereas like CDU and stuff is like, oh, the Russians are in Ukraine, so we got to build up our military and all this and that.
Well, see, and that's the thing. So I forget, Britain, I think, is so like the whole one of the big negotiating things was that the Europeans are going to put troops in Ukraine, right? Wasn't that one of the big like items that they were saying was going to get done, or that people were
Uh,
advocating?
that was something people were advocating. If it's going to happen or not at
Well,
this point.
but let's say it does, because I think there's honestly a more decent chance of that happening than like obviously the United States putting boots on the ground.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And honestly, continuing any sort of involvement, if I think we will, but it'll be at a much more minimal level. And I can totally see the Europeans coming in. I I think that's going to be obviously led by Poland and probably Ukraine, or uh, obviously Ukraine, but Poland and England. I think are going to be pushing for it. You're going to the Latvia, all the Estonia places. So all of kind of like East Germany, I think, is going to be pushing for that, and I think Macron will probably go along with it. I think the Italian one, and so I could see Germany being like the last ones to go, and I can almost see them kind of getting dragged into having to do it.
That seems likely if they can't get the
And
debt rate.
I think because of that, they're going to have to increase military spending. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, they're going to have to do something about it.
Now, the nightmare scenario for them though is like they do, they do forge this grand coalition to do that, but then like, a year down the line, it's you got like four different parties with different ideological standpoints trying to run a government, and then if that falls apart, then there's a high possibility next round of elections, the AFD was the only party not in that coalition. I don't think they'll never outright win it. They'll never get like 40% or 50% outright, but they could, next round I wouldn't be surprised if like that happens. The government falls apart. The next round, AFD comes in first place. At that point, it's like in Germany and like a lot of these European nations, they have what they call the cordon sanitaire, which is it's kind of an old archaic term, but it's basically in the political usage. It's like all the other parties refuse to work with the quote unquote far right. But like if the AFD comes in first place next time, like I said, like that scenario, like I don't see how that cordon could be maintained without Germany being like completely ungovernable. So I mean, it's there's a lot of different ways this can go. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
You want to know what I always tell people about these far right groups? And
Oh, let's hear
I'm
it.
not. I know people be like, "Oh my god," is that I always say the Nazis only won 30% of their vote when they were elected into office. It's forming these coalitions is kind of like what can get you screwed. And I say that just because it's like I think it's important to point out that even though they're like what 20 something percent, 24% or something, even though they're that even though they're that small, they could still wield outsized influence that will come to show in several other ways. Like I think there's going to be some pretty decent impact on policy just because of how large they are, and I think they're going to be able to force a few things through.
Oh yeah, I think in the long run, yeah, I have no doubt about that because it's like the fundamental issues that have driven their rise are not being addressed, and now that like they've been showing consistent gains over the last several elections. So I mean, it does at this point appear like they're going to stick around, and like as long as their core issues aren't being met, and that same issue, like the whole thing that propelled them in the first place, is still going to be there. And who knows? like I said, like BSW came within like 13,000 votes of being in this parliament, and like BSW and AFD are very AFD is more like traditionally right wing. BSW is kind of more old school left, where it's socially conservative, but it's economically really left wing and stuff like that. So it's like in the future, you very much could see like I said, like they're the two parties on they could be the two parties on the outs this time, but next time they'd be the only parties that wouldn't be tainted by like a failed coalition, and then between the two of them, there's your votes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's definitely a lot of interesting possibilities can come for this, and I do think, like I said earlier, like this is the sort of stuff that really kind of defines a new era. And one thing we were talking about military spending, I meant to bring up. Mers brought up like over there in Germany, it's like it's a really big thing to be like anti-Trump and stuff, and like the big thing he was making is like Elon Musk endorsed AFD and this and that and this and that, and it's like. And one of the big reasons he decided he wanted to increase military spending was so Germany could have strategic independence from the United States.
Yeah.
That's a huge shift. Like, I mean, obviously they're not, it's not 1940. They're not about to go conquer Europe, but it's like the fact that they want to retake strategic independence, and there's obviously.
And my big issue with all that, man, is I'm like, I agree with the guy. I'm like, you should have strategic independence from the United States. You should be able to contain yourself and be able to operate independently. But what irritates me the most about Trump is it's like you need to be able to do that concurrently with us, right? Is like I feel like with Trump, he's just kind of like, all right, fuck him, just throws them out there and says, all right, figure it out. You know, you guys are on
Yeah.
your own. And I'm like, look, there's got to be a better way of doing that. Because I'm like, that's just how you fucking ruin relationships and you piss people off. And like, I don't know if I really like. I think right now America needs allies, and I don't think we should be pissing off Germany and or France or whoever the fuck. I'm like, man, we should be pissing off the Europeans about their military spending or something like that, and by saying, oh fuck them, they're on their own. I just don't know if that's the right way to go about it.
I do think it's funny though, because like his whole response was like, okay, like we're going to build up our military and have that strategic independence. And it's like that was the whole like that was what we fucking wanted you to do for like a decade now. So it's kind of like you're getting back at us by doing exactly what we've been trying to get you to do for like at least since 2014. So I mean, what is that? 11 years now. It's like that
Yeah.
is kind of funny, but I mean, and I do agree with you. Like, I do want them to get like their strategic independence because like it shouldn't be imperative. Like to switch to like an American perspective, like it really should not be imperative on us. Like we've done it enough now. We 2 world wars, 50 years of the Cold War. Like it's kind of time for them to kind of do it. And I do like, if they want to do that and they want to take up their strategic independence and kind of manage things in Europe, then go at it. That does like it's like I said, like we've been trying to get you to do that forever. So it's like do it. Like that's literally what we're.
So do you think? Here's something I've always thought about: is do you think that if Russia invades, and they invade Poland or whoever it is, kicks off World War III, and the Europeans have to fight. Do you think they would be good, or do you think they'd be bad? And honestly, do you think that's going to make them shift from like liberal to way more conservative?
I definitely think they'd be bad because like there's nothing innate about military power. Like the whole reason Germany was so like amazing like in 2 world wars was because they spent decades at that point building up. Like Germany, I think, was the first to have like a modern professional general staff. So it was like the really trained officers. They made the war plans, they handled the logistics and all that good stuff. So it's kind of like they put in the work, and like at this point that like most of Europe has just like especially after the Cold War, they just so depleted their military apparatuses that they're like shells of their former selves, and that's not something you can fix overnight. Like the point, like for an American context, like in 1938 we had, I think our military was smaller than Romania, and it wasn't really till 1943, so that was about 4 or 5 years to really get us built up to where we could be the military power we became. So I mean, they're really kind of it does look like it would take them several years to kind of get back to where they want to be. Now, as far as like political ramifications of that, absolutely. Um, you know who Samo Berge is?
No.
So he's this. He does geopolitics, but he also kind of does a lot of different stuff in it. He's kind of, I guess you would say, Twitter famous in a sense. And like he made I was listening to a podcast with him today about it, and like one of the points he made is like, okay, if they're talking about like doing like these military buildups of stuff, in order to get those military buildups, you either have to do conscription or you got to get people to enlist. And like at the key of it too, to like really motivate a lot of these people, like you do have to have like a sense of, like patriotism of like nationalism and stuff. And he's like, really, Europe since 1945 has made it a habit to kind of keep a lid on that. So I mean, like in order to kind of have the military power tomorrow, they kind of got to lift the lid today. And the problem with once you lift that lid, you really can't put it back on all too easy. And I mean,
Yeah.
AFD is really nationalistic. BSW is really nationalistic. It's going to force political change on them, and it's just that's kind of inevitable. And I do think it would kind of push them from like a more liberal thing, because like a lot of these like liberal parties over there, like socialist parties, they're not huge on like military spending to begin with. I mean, they're kind of, I mean, like they're like really anti-Russian, like pro-Ukraine, but they're also kind of like, oh, do we really want to spend 5% of GDP on defense or stuff? And it's like, it's overall they're just all these European nations are getting put in the position where they do have to start like basically knifing these parties, and they've also got to like ride the tiger in a sense of like, okay, like German nationalism. It's okay to be like a patriotic German again. And like, once you do that, it's not going to be the same as it is now.
Solid take.
Yeah, I was thinking of something.
I mean, think about us after 9/11. Like, I don't like Josh. You're probably too young. Andrew, you might remember. I think, yeah, you were actually Andrew. You're a little bit older than me, so you probably definitely remember.
I was like alive. I just wasn't.
I was alive.
Like,
I may have been in the crib, but I was
I was
alive.
gonna say I was like
yeah,
5.
no, that's me
Yeah.
too. That's
Like,
me.
I don't-
I was in the crib, but I was existing.
Like, I remember watching. Okay, like a quick side note because this is kind of funny. Like, I was like watching SpongeBob when that happened, and like they ended up like going to like live coverage of it. So I was like 4 or 5 years old watching 9/11 happen, having no idea what was going on. But and like think of how much we changed like after the war on terror. Like, I don't know if you like Andrew, you probably definitely remember it. Do you like especially
Airport
like all
security
the
sucks.
airport security, like Toby Keith patriotic songs? Like, it was a big deal.
I
Like,
mean, honestly, dude, the stuff that I remember with all that, I really like. Like I remember, like we went to a very small airport town in Texas, and like it was one of those where like a small plane flies in and you walk off the tarmac. Like it was one of like I remember it being one of those, and that was always kind of like what some of the earliest stuff I remember is like you could do. Like I remember the plane stuff being different. Um, Honestly, like I don't remember Iraq or any of that kind of stuff. Like I don't really like. I remember the first real political thing I remembered was when they found Saddam Hussein. And that was about like that was like the first really like political thing I saw that was kind of happening. Other than that, like didn't remember following anything. After that, it was honestly it was probably like the '08 election. Because it was like McCain versus
Obama.
Obama.
See, I remember like the anthrax scare back in 2002. I remember invading Iraq and stuff. And kind of the main point I'm getting with that is just like, it kind of, I think we kind of forget it today, but like back in like the 2000s, like it was really patriotic here. Like there was definitely like, I mean, like I said, like about every song on the radio was like some sort of patriotic song. Everybody hated the Dixie Chicks. I mean, and the whole reason they hated the Dixie Chicks because they were anti-Iraq war, and so that was a big thing. And like, I, obviously, I'm not saying that like Germany's going to get attacked or whatever, but like I do think once they lift the lid on that patriotism, just as it kind of really roared here, it could roar there. And one thing I'll know, since we're talking about like AFD, what their things could be, they've been very. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but like I can definitely say at least elements of them because like each German state kind of has its own party version, and like several other party versions are pretty like nationalistic already, and then like the AFD as a body, like. So in Germany, back during the Cold War, West Germany signed this agreement with like I think it was the Poles, East Germany, and the Soviets. I think it was. It was like I can't remember the actual term of the agreement. They basically recognized the current modern borders of Germany. So for much of the Cold War, Germany still claimed its old territories that are mostly controlled by Poland nowadays. So back in 2023, there was kind of this big kerfuffle over there because like AFD was being very coy about what the borders of Germany were, and there was kind of an insinuation of like at least elements of the party kind of feel like they should get those old territories back. And I mean,
Well, I know you're a big Poland fan.
Oh Lord, I hate Poland. But so I mean, who knows? I mean, like, and the AFD is kind of pro-Russian, so I mean, you could eventually see something. If nationalism comes back, AFD takes power, you could see a situation where AFD's like,
could see another
yeah.
Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact part 2.
Exactly. I mean, like it's like I said, once you lift the lid off this stuff, yeah. It's like once you lift the lid off this stuff, it's they think they can control it. I don't think they can, and I'm not like and personally, I do think I do think patriotism and nationalism are important. But like in their context, like they're trying to channel it into very specific ways instead of letting it just be like a natural thing. And I think once you add all the other stressors, like in the situation, like I don't know, you could see some crazy stuff come out of this.
So the thing that I always thought that's always I've always thought this about Europe. I basically was like, once you go past Warsaw, there's really nothing between Warsaw and fucking Moscow, like city wise, right? Like there's not that much, and I always
I
sit
just
there and I think I'm like, that's one of the big issues with this whole Germany and Russia thing is it's like there's nothing in between the two except for Poland, and it's like if you wanted to kind of prevent some of that, okay, you got to have some bigger cities out east, and you've got to have some bigger stuff out west, to kind of like prevent the collapse from the east and west of Poland.
I just want you to know, like the Belarusians are going to come after us now because you just said there's nothing there. They're going
Okay,
to send
well,
they're going to
they're
send
Minsk, right? Aren't they Minsk?
they're going to send the KBG after us, which
Oh
like
yeah.
their intelligence services literally called the KGB, which is pretty funny.
Let me
But
see.
yeah, there's
Cities
I think like really once you get out, you're not wrong. Like it's literally just like I think between there and Moscow, I think it's Minsk and then Smolensk, and then I want to say that's it. I think Novigorod is in that region too, but that's kind of it's not as big as it used to be.
Let me see if I can find something.
Which by the way, speaking on this like a general term, like the whole like Germany and Russia thing, that is a very recognized geopolitical.
Fair.
Yes, it's like
That's
that
fair.
is the I can't remember the. I think it's not the Heartland theory because that's more about like Eurasia as a whole, but like the whole like a big motivation for the U.S. in the Cold War and the well, we'll start with like the whole reason the Germans
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
like the big reason the Germans went to war and like especially in 1941 stuff was like that's a huge chunk of space. It's got all these resources. It's huge amount of land, a lot of fertile land. Like if you can unite Russian resources with German industry, that's a power that can challenge just about anybody. Like they'd have
Yeah.
enough population, they'd have enough resources. Like even today, it would not be impossible for them to give like us and the Chinese like separately a run for the money. So like for most of the Cold War, like the big reason we were like so concerned with like the Soviets was like, okay, if the Soviets take over West Germany, they'll achieve what Hitler couldn't do. They've got German resources and they're not German resources, German industry and their resources under their control.
Yeah.
And so like a big reason, like, you brought up the Nord Stream earlier. That was a huge deal in national security circles here back in the 2010s because it's like, okay, the Russians, the Germans are getting a little close. The Russians are starting to supply them with all this energy, like that can reduce our influence on Germany.
Oh, I think we talked. Did we talk?
I'm pretty sure we
You and I
have.
talked about it. Where I sat there and I said, I think they did it to. I think the United States helped people do it. I don't know enough about it to say who,
Mhm.
but I think they did enough about it so that it was almost kind of like you got to make a decision on which way you're going about this.
Yeah,
And it almost was like balls in your court, Germany. You got to make a decision, and they went, and I think history will probably go back, and I think they'll not vindicate, but they'll look more favorably on that chancellor because he ended up staying with Europe instead of leaving Europe, and I think that was something that I don't know if the Biden administration thought would happen, but I'm willing to bet you they're glad that it did happen.
It was definitely like a bridge burning episode in a sense because it's like, and I mean, I think that's a lot of the why everybody freaks about the AFD is because like I said, like they do have I don't want to over exaggerate their pro-Russian stance, but they're kind of like, we really don't care about Ukraine. Like we need to have, there's no reason we can't have like energy deals with Russia. It's kind of more like, I mean, I'm sure there is like some like extremely like pro segments, but it's from what I've seen, it's mostly like just kind of like a pragmatic like look, like they're there, we kind of need them, they kind of need us, like just kind of deal with the situation as is. But I mean, in the future, and like I said, just in the future, like you never know.
So this is the map. So and this is I just picked largest cities or whatever. So you can see like Hamburg, Berlin, Prague, Budapest, Bucharest. And it's like you just kind of got this line right here. and then it's like Warsaw, right there in the middle,
Yeah.
and it's like there's nothing between here and Moscow other than Warsaw. Yeah, you got Minsk and Kiev and all this other kind of stuff, but you kind of get my point.
Yeah.
Especially considering this was usually considered actually part of Russia, the Ukraine and Belarus, and it's like okay, there's nothing in between here except for Warsaw. So like, who's taking Warsaw?
Well, kind of on that note, the reason it's even called Ukraine is it's kind of like a translation of this word that literally means like borderlands.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it was kind of like the frontier between the east and the west.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting, and like if there's if anybody takes anything from tonight, like this is kind of marks a new era. Like this is something like that hasn't happened in Germany politically in a long time, and like it's going to be a while before we really kind of know the ramifications of it. But I mean, it's like as we've kind of went over, there's a lot of different ways this can go from here, and I do think it's kind of interesting and something to keep an eye on.
So let's tie this back to Doge, and Elon Musk. Do you think he was being like? Did you think when he was looking at, doing the stuff he did in Germany, on Twitter and stuff? Do you think he was doing it because he wanted whatever is happening now to happen, or do you think he was doing it for another reason?
I think Elon has some special interest. I mean,
so that means you're saying, I think Elon Musk did the stuff he did to boost the AFD because if the AFD wins, X, Y, and Z will be beneficial for me.
I think that is. I think I'm with you on that.
Do you think it's with Elon or do you think it's with like America, the United States?
I think it's with Elon. I mean, I guess my question then would become, do you think Elon like is doing the right things or everything, or do you think he's getting a little over the top?
I mean, Austin, what do you think?
It's hard to say because it's not clear his endorsement had really any effect. Like they kind of ended up doing as they were polled to predict, like the polls predicted they would do. So it's but the one thing that kind of stops me is like MERS, like I said, like a while ago, like his whole thing was like, okay, well now we're going to increase defense spending to 5%. We're going to be strategically independent. It's like that was the big thing Trump's been kind of wanting you guys to do anyway. So it's kind of like I don't want to. It's one of those situations where I don't feel like they were smart enough to do like a 5D chess or whatever it's called. But like it is kind of hard not to deny the end result was kind of more or less as they wanted. Like AFD is still the second largest party, and the Germans are still kind of doing what we were pushing them to do. So it's like I don't know.
Yeah,
it is kind of. If nothing else, it was kind of convenient. It worked out as we wanted it to work out. I'll put it like that.
So I think what irritates me about the whole Elon thing is I feel like he's just kind of he's getting involved in stuff like that. I just don't like. He was doing stuff in the UK and others, and like for me, I guess I'm just kind of like like I don't know if he should be doing that, right? And I'd probably argue I don't think a lot of other people should be doing it, but I know people do it.
Yeah.
And so like for me, I'm just kind of like, yeah, like him getting involved in this AFD thing, like you said, maybe it didn't do anything, but I'm like, I don't really know if you should be getting involved in that.
I
think he's getting a little. I think he's getting a little out there on the power stuff, man.
I think if I'm understanding your point right, is like you don't feel like we should be like as Americans sticking our nose in other countries like political affairs.
I think we should. Like okay. I think the United States should.
I agree too with that.
I don't think Elon should.
Yes, that was where I was going. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
exactly
Elon, like if we just acknowledge that Elon's doing what he did in Germany for Elon, then what he's doing in the UK is for Elon, and in some of these other places is Elon, and he's using Twitter as a vehicle to do that. I don't know if I like that. But if the United States was doing, which is basically the CIA, then it's like hey, like that's
not
business.
To relate this, but because I'm not saying that this is like the situation, but it wasn't like didn't people over there in Germany love Hitler, and it was the people around him that were going crazy.
What do you mean going crazy?
I'm kind of confused too.
like wasn't it like the like wasn't like the like it wasn't like the dudes around him like a good majority of the reason of everything that happened that was bad. I could be wrong here. I'm
I mean,
I-
Hitler was definitely like, hey, like we should do this.
I kind of get what you're saying. Or you kind of saying it was kind of more of it was you're kind of making the comparison like, okay, it's if Elon's acting
yeah
kind of crazy, and then versus
yeah
like Herman Goring acting kind of crazy.
yeah. I'm
Uh,
not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying it gets a little. It's a little like just a
you're kind of
something to
making that
be.
comparison. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's something I'm just kind of like you prick your ears up a little bit and you're like okay.
I mean, I guess. I mean, either way, like, okay, even if Herman Goering is doing it, like, hey, it's still not like a good thing we should be like he should be doing. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm just like, yeah, I don't like the guy. Like he gets involved in stuff he doesn't need to do, and he does it in a way that doesn't need to be done. And I think that him doing this stuff with AFD, like, who knows? I would be like, I would just like to see kind of like what he's trading it for. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're pushing these people, you're doing this. What are you getting out of it? Like, do you have a stated goal, or is it just kind of like political capital that you're just building up? That's one thing I would want to know.
There is some like I would say like water geopolitical plays kind of underfoot right now, which he could be tied into. Like I do know.
Let me just give you an example of what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of I could see him trying to get the AFD higher up to put pressure on Germany to accept whatever deal is going to come out with Ukraine.
Yeah, I could definitely. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's definitely part of it. But
like that makes sense to me. But I'm like, is that Elon or is that the United States?
Well, it's. I'm trying to think of a way to like phrase it, but like one thing like there is kind of like a Western Europe is just so culturally tied to us. A lot of the same kind of political dynamics in the sense of like, your right wing parties are allied with our right wing parties, and your left wing parties are aligned with our left wing parties. It could just be kind of more of that. But like in terms of kind of like the water stuff going on, like one thing I saw today was like Israel is like really hardcore. Like they're looking at kind of formally allying with like AFD in Germany, and they're trying.
I heard that too. I heard AFD is like they're super nationalistic, but they're also super pro Israel. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, Hitler's gonna be rolling in his grave hearing this shit.
Well,
he supports the state of Israel. Like,
For real.
And then like Musk is like very kind of like pro-Israel too, so it could be like more of that's kind of like an angle too. It's like I said, like there's geopolitical stuff kind of.
Yeah.
And if you're super religious, you got to be behind them.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. Well, we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm seriously interested. I think I always, like you said, I always thought Germany was interesting. And we can end it after here. I always thought Germany was interesting. I always thought that, I feel like it's kind of hasn't been the Germany it's been, probably since the 2000s, early 2010s. And so, like, I'm not surprised that you're seeing this election and this change happening in their political system. I'm not surprised at all. It's kind of like with what they were talking about with France. Like, a lot of the same issues that you see in France are the same fucking issues that you see in the UK, that are the same issues you're seeing in the US. So I'm not surprised Germany's another one to fall, So
people are calling it like our 21st century crisis.
Yeah, I see that. I see that.
You know what we really need to do before we close this off? This is something I feel like we should start doing, and I meant to suggest it before, like earlier in the group chat. We need to start writing down our predictions, and then come up like maybe like a year from now we can do kind of like a retrospective and be like, okay, we thought this could happen. Did this happen? Yeah. Or like we should do that because like
I'm down with that.
We need like
also, I am still waiting on our space and AI meeting.
We need to do that because there's so much happening on that too now.
So yeah, let's do it. Let's maybe what we could do is for our next video or something, maybe later this week, we could do just a prediction, and we'll just talk about okay, here's what we think is going to happen, and we all just throw out ideas, and we'll all create notes of like what.
Dude, I can share a screen and like do like a Word doc and have like all three of our names and like
do that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so that'll be the next one.
Right,
quick and easy. There you go.
See you, boys.
All right, so Austin, final thoughts on what's going on in Germany.
Give us a closing argument.
What's going on at work? What's going on? Closing thoughts.
Pure chaos. Welcome to 2025. We're gonna have a lot of fun this year. I mean, at this point, like it's nothing will surprise.
And then hold on, and then tell me what you're excited to see about Germany. Like what's not a prediction, but what do you think's gonna kind of come down the pipe?
I think the fact that like it's becoming it's God. If I could do one episode without me stuttering, we would be like rolling in the ad revenue at this point. But like, I as far as excitement, it's the fact that like they're reaching the point where they can't ignore the issues. Like if they keep ignoring the issues, the AFD is going to take power, and then they'll handle the issues. So I do think it is kind of exciting for that sense for the Germans to kind of know that like eventually something's got to give, and it seems like it's going to be sooner rather than later.
And then in the next episode, we'll see what your prediction is of what's going to cause it to break.
Okay.
All right, Josh. Closing thoughts. What do you think is going to happen in Germany?
Honestly, I think me and you've talked about it. I kind of like Austin's idea there. I'm kind of with that. I don't really have a full on thought right now. I mean, everything's kind of, to me, it's like I'm kind of like looking around, but I'm not sure yet. I still think it's Elon doing it for Elon, and I think we'll kind of have to see where the cards fall on it.
How much of what is going on would you say is all Elon?
I think everything right now.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I don't mean that like a mean way to him or anything. I mean, like, he's a business guy. Like, he's got his special interests that he's trying to get done, and like, that's like that is what it is. But like, it's just like I feel like it's all him. Just right now, it is. It just feels like that. I mean, I love Twitter, by the way. Like, I mean, but yeah.
So here's my closing thoughts on. So I already gave my closing thoughts. Here's what I think is going to happen with Germany, and then we'll end this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, as I mentioned kind of earlier, we see a lot of people moving over to the CDU, and I think we've got a lot of people. Like I think we're seeing the pendulum shift to the right, and I think we're going to land right back in the center, and I think things are going to kind of calibrate, as long as there isn't a major, honestly, a major world event. As long as there's not a major world event, I could totally see the shift back towards more left groups.
There will be a major world event
happening in 2026 at least. That's in the United States. That's in Germany, France, you name it. That's my prediction. So, well, and
I think there will be a major world event. I mean, not to add on to what you're saying, I just think there will be.
Well, but like, look at it. Look, right now people say the economy is not great. Okay, we have a recession. Who's going to get blamed for that? All the conservative groups that are in power right now.
Yeah, forget the bird flu, man.
So that's why I think that's what it is. I think Republicans and the conservative groups in Germany and you name it. I think they're about to take a hit because they are in the wrong place at the wrong, or I guess to them it's the right place at the wrong time.
Well, if you're going to buy crypto, buy it now.
So, all right, let's end it there.
All right, see you guys.
See you.
Yep. Alrighty, cutting this off, Andrew, in 4, 3, 2.